Every day she takes a morning bath and wets her hair, wraps a towel around her and she's headed for the bedroom chair. It's just another day, slipping into stockings, stepping into shoes, dipping in the pocket of a raincoat. It's just another day. At the office where the papers grow, she takes a break, drinks another coffee and she finds it hard to stay awake. It's just another day. It's just another day. It's just another day. So sad, so sad. Sometimes she feels so sad. Alone in her apartment she dwells till the man of her dreams comes to break the spell. Oh, stand her up. And he comes and he stays, but he leaves the next day. So sad. Sometimes she feels so sad. As she posts another letter to the sound of fire, people gather around her and she finds it hard to stay alive. It's just another day. It's just another day. It's just another day. Oh, so sad, so sad. Sometimes she feels so sad. Alone in her apartment she dwells till the man of her dreams comes to break the spell. Oh, stand her up. And he comes and he stays, but he leaves the next day. So sad. Sometimes she feels so sad. Every day she takes a morning bath and wets her hair, wraps a towel around her and she's headed for the bedroom chair. It's just another day, slipping into stockings, stepping into shoes, dipping in the pocket of a raincoat. It's just another day. It's just another day. It's just another
Paul McCartney, Another Day, released as a single in the lead up to his release of the album Ram. Subsequent re-releases of Ram include Another Day, but originally it was just a single. Interestingly, if the World Wide Web is to be believed, it was a number one hit, but it was panned by critics to a certain extent, and he also caught some slack from some of his former Beatles. This was his first foray post-Beatles. I dig the song. I think it's great. To me, it's somewhat reminiscent of something like Eleanor Rigby, and Paul is really good at this, where it's just like he'll write these lyrics that are talking about something somewhat melancholy, somewhat mundane, but then he puts it to music and melody, and it sounds great. Speaking of Eleanor Rigby, side story. So, I grew up in the era where many radio stations would play the Beatles like on Sundays for like 4-hour blocks. But it wasn't like they were playing the White Album. It was a lot of their early stuff, which, I like a lot of that stuff, but I'm more like post 1966 Beatles. To me is it's more interesting. But you think about like even their early stuff, how that was basically pop music of the day. It was still musically, harmonically very complex to a certain extent, or to a large extent, depending on the song. But anyway, so I'm in 6th grade, and the Paul McCartney that I knew at that time, just, when I was born and what I'd been exposed to, he was the Paul McCartney that did Ebony and Ivory and Say, which Say to me, I can go back to listen to that now, and I'm like, I dig it. It's a great song. But I didn't know the Paul McCartney of the late 60s and the early 70s, I guess is my point at this age. But in 6th grade, I was introduced to Eleanor Rigby in a 6th grade English class, and it was the Beatles, obviously. I just remember being I just thought it was a great song, and I became much more interested in the Beatles at that time. And really, that interest didn't really take action probably until I was in high school, and that's when I started to kind of go back to the cool Beatles era in my mind. It's all good, but again, post 1966 is really the Beatles that are kind of in my wheelhouse. But getting back to this song, great chord progression, has some cool moves in it. If you go back and listen to Paul, like what he did in the studio, and again, when you think about it, working on 8-track tape, and all the cool little parts that they shove into this song. I just basically banged out chords on an acoustic guitar and played bass. But if you go listen to the Paul McCartney studio version, there's so many cool little intricacies, and just the amount of planning they must have had to do, and like really good engineering to make sure they got good sounds for when they're bouncing tracks. Impressive. Linda put some really cool harmonies on this song. Very reminiscent to me of like Mamas and Papas style harmonies. Obviously, I put a lot of harmonies on what I did on my cover, but mine's more probably 50s doo-wop. Her harmony's much cooler than mine. But yeah, it all adds up to a really cool song, and which is what Paul McCartney tends to do. Thanks.
P.S. I forgot to mention, one of the coolest things about the song is that there's this time signature change in the So Sad part, where it's going from the normal verse to that So Sad. It's not really a chorus, it's just a section of the song. And that part, so it's in 4/4 in the regular verse, and then in that section, and when it repeats later in the song, it goes to, I guess it's something in 3. It's probably like 6/8. Not an expert on counting that out, but again, I can count to 3, and I know it's not in 4/4. So like I said, it's probably in 6/8. I didn't do that, and the main reason was I couldn't figure out in my DAW how to change. I'm sure there's a way to do it, but I just didn't take the time to figure it out and put and change my click so it could go from 4/4 to 6/8. If you go listen to McCartney, pay attention to that. And how I corrected that is I just dragged out the vocal a little bit so it fit into 4/4. But the 6/8 part is really cool as well. Way to go, Paul.